In the heart of Africa lies the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a nation of staggering beauty and immense paradox, painted with vibrant rainforests and the powerful Congo River. Its soil holds wealth that could power nations. Diamonds, gold, and coltan abound. Yet the Congo's story is one of heartbreaking hardship. Its natural wealth contrasts cruelly with the daily reality of its people. Riches have fueled conflict and exploitation for generations. The Congo is a contradiction, blessed with abundance, yet its people are among the poorest. This disconnect is the result of a long history of exploitation that continues today. Cobalt has quietly become the lifeblood of our 21st century existence. It is arguably more essential to the way we live now. Cobalt is the critical ingredient in the rechargeable lithium-ion batteries that energize our modern world, powering electric vehicles and storing power from wind and solar farms. More than 70% of the world's cobalt is mined from Congolese soil. Our technological advancement is dependent on the ground beneath this one Central African nation, creating a link between us, the consumers, and the people of the Congo. The story of cobalt is our story too. The story of cobalt is often told as one of progress, a cleaner, brighter future thanks to cool new tech. But underneath is a darker truth, the Congo's dark secret. For many, it's dangerous work and exploitation. It starts in uncontrolled mining spots that scar the land. Men, women, and even young kids go into hand-dug tunnels. They risk their lives daily in unsafe conditions. This is a gamble with death for very little money. It's a secret of people being taken advantage of. The miners receive very little for their dangerous work. It's a story of kids working in mines instead of being in school. It's a story of poisoned water and health problems. Their mineral-rich land has become a source of pain. In this documentary, we journey into the Congo's cobalt mining regions to expose hidden truths and give voice to the voiceless. We'll listen to the miners' stories, their struggles and hopes for their children. This is an unflinching exploration of the cobalt supply chain, from mine to smartphone. We ask, who profits? What are tech companies doing to ensure ethical sourcing? We'll uncover the devastating environmental consequences of unregulated mining. Join us as we connect our lives to those in the Congo, challenging assumptions about the true cost of progress. Every day we wake up and plug into a world that runs on an invisible force. We reach for our smartphones and laptops to work, learn, create, and consume. This power is fueled by cobalt, a humble metal that's become strategically vital. It's the silent workhorse in lithium-ion batteries, essential for our portable electronic ecosystem. Billions of devices rely on it, forming the backbone of a multi-trillion-dollar global industry. Cobalt underpins the daily activities of much of the human population. Our modern life, with its demand for connectivity, has been built upon this essential mineral. Understanding cobalt's role is the first step to understanding the implications of where it's sourced. To appreciate cobalt's importance, we need to look at the science behind lithium-ion batteries. A lithium-ion battery works by moving lithium ions between a positive cathode and a negative anode. Cobalt plays a starring role in the cathode, often as lithium cobalt oxide. Its unique atomic structure creates a stable framework that gives batteries longevity and reliability. Furthermore, cobalt helps maximize the energy density of the battery. Beyond longevity and energy density, cobalt provides a crucial element of safety by stabilizing the cathode. While scientists seek alternatives, cobalt remains key to portable electronics and energy storage. Cobalt is at the heart of the transition away from fossil fuels. The global push to combat climate change has ignited a revolution in transportation and energy. Cobalt is the fuel for that revolution, essential for electric vehicles and massive energy storage solutions. As the world aims to put millions of electric vehicles on the road, the demand for cobalt is set to explode. The very mineral that is essential for building a greener future is sourced in a way that is often deeply unsustainable and unethical. Our pursuit of environmental responsibility is directly fueling a human and environmental crisis in the heart of Africa. This is the central tension of the Green Revolution. Cobalt's story is a fascinating journey through art, science, and industry. For millennia, it was prized for its beauty, used to create a stunning blue pigment in glass and ceramics. The element was formally identified in 1735 by Georg Brandt. The name cobalt comes from German miners who considered it a nuisance. In the 20th century, its strength and heat resistance led to its use in superalloys for jet engines. The lithium-ion battery revolutionized cobalt's importance. From pigment to batteries, cobalt became key to mobile technology. This transformation highlights how scientific discovery can redefine a natural resource's value. The global demand for cobalt is accelerating, fueled by consumer electronics and the electric vehicle market, creating a steepening demand curve. Over 70% of the world's cobalt originates from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, creating a fragile supply chain. Demand is expected to double or even triple by the end of this decade. This raises questions about the sustainability of our current path. At what human and environmental cost will this demand be met? We are on a collision course with the limits of our cobalt supply. In the face of rising prices, volatile supply chains, and mounting ethical concerns, the logical question is, why not just use something else? This is the billion-dollar question that researchers and battery engineers are desperately trying to answer. The search for a cobalt-free battery is one of the most intense pursuits in modern material science. Companies are pouring vast resources into developing alternative cathode chemistries that can match cobalt's performance without the problems. The goal is to find a new material that is cheaper, more abundant, and ethically sourced, effectively designing cobalt out of the system. Several alternatives have emerged, each with its own promises and compromises. For example, lithium iron phosphate or LFP are completely cobalt-free. They are safer and have a longer lifespan. However, they have significantly lower energy density, which means the battery must be larger and heavier. This makes them suitable for standard-range electric vehicles or stationary storage, but less ideal for long-range EVs or lightweight electronics where size and weight are critical. Another approach uses much less cobalt, like nickel-manganese cobalt, or NMC, or nickel-cobalt-aluminum, NCA batteries, but this only reduces rather than eliminates the problem. The fundamental challenge is that cobalt's unique atomic properties are incredibly difficult to replicate. It hits a sweet spot of performance metrics that no other element has matched perfectly. When engineers increase nickel content, the battery becomes less stable, with shorter cycle life. When they turn to manganese, they sacrifice performance at extreme temperatures. Every potential replacement involves a trade-off. It's like trying to bake a cake without a key ingredient. You can find substitutes, but the result is never quite the same. While progress is being made and cobalt content is slowly decreasing in some designs, it remains indispensable in high-performance applications. For premium, long-range electric vehicles and compact, powerful electronics, cobalt is still the king. The transition away from cobalt will be a slow, gradual evolution over many years. For the immediate future, our modern world will continue to rely on this powerful, problematic, and deeply important blue metal. The story of cobalt is woven into our daily lives. It connects our technologies to the red earth of the Congo. Every text, video, or electric car ride participates in a system that begins in Congolese mines. The smartphone is a repository of global resources. It contains a piece of the Congo. The electric vehicle carries a mineral at the center of an ethical dilemma. Recognizing this connection is the first step toward responsible technology use. Our lives are intertwined, placing a shared responsibility upon us all. The global journey of cobalt begins in the red earth of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Not in a high-tech mine but in sprawling artisanal sites. From the air they look like angry red scars. This is ground zero, the first step in a multi-billion-dollar supply chain. There is no heavy machinery here, just the rhythmic sound of shovels and the dust that hangs heavy in the air. The soil is rich with cobalt, a blessing and a curse. The temperatures are scorching, the air thick with hazardous dust. The hand-dug pits become death traps, prone to collapses. This landscape has been fundamentally broken. From this red earth, the journey begins. It begins with the people whose hands are the first to touch the stone. They are called creuseurs, diggers. They are the engine of the artisanal mining sector, an informal workforce of over 200,000 people in the Congo's cobalt regions. They are men, women, and children who descend into the earth each day with basic tools. Their work is grueling, repetitive, and extraordinarily dangerous. Some dig the vertical shafts, others, often the younger miners, work in narrow tunnels. Above ground, women and children often work washing and sorting the ore. The miners suffer from chronic health problems like respiratory illnesses. They are sacrificing their long-term health for short-term survival, forced upon them by extreme poverty. A creuseurs' income is never guaranteed and they have no bargaining power. They are the most essential link in the entire supply chain, yet they are also the most exploited. Miners sell cobalt-rich rock to local traders, the first point of contact in a complex network. These traders buy ore directly from miners, assessing its quality and offering a price. They aggregate small purchases into larger quantities for sale up the chain to negotiants at depots. The cobalt is weighed, tested, and changes hands again. This opaque web is characterized by information control and debt cycles, pushing risk onto miners. Numerous cash transactions without paperwork make tracing the origin of cobalt incredibly difficult, obscuring potential human rights abuses. Artisanal cobalt makes its way to large, walled depots or buying houses. These collection points consolidate ore purchased from middlemen into industrial quantities. Cobalt sacks are weighed and a sample is assayed to determine cobalt content. The greatest challenge to ethical sourcing occurs here: the mixing of cobalt from different sources. Cobalt from regulated zones, illegal sites using child labor, and stolen ore are all dumped into the same piles. This creates a blend of clean and unclean material. This mixing is the great laundering machine of the Congolese cobalt trade. It becomes impossible to distinguish the origins. This blended material is sold to the next level of the supply chain. The cobalt is loaded onto large trucks and transported out of the country, ready to be shipped overseas. The trucks, laden with cobalt ore, rumble out of Katanga, beginning a long journey. The destination is a seaport, but getting there is a challenge. This overland journey can take weeks, navigating poor roads and border crossings. At the border, the cobalt undergoes customs. Once across the border, its origin becomes tenuous. The majority of this cobalt is destined for Asia, specifically China. Chinese companies have invested heavily in Congolese mining. This gives China control over the cobalt supply chain. At ports like Durban, the ore is loaded onto container ships for China. The value is immense, but the human cost is not listed. As the ships cross the ocean, the cobalt is effectively laundered. It's ready to be received by the industrial powerhouses of the East. The ships carrying Congolese cobalt ore arrive at major Chinese ports like Shanghai or Ningbo, where they're offloaded and transported to their final destination, these massive chemical refineries. These sprawling industrial complexes are where, the raw, rocky ore undergoes its ultimate transformation. It's a highly sophisticated and, honestly, energy-intensive process. The ore is first crushed and ground into a fine powder. Then, through a complex series of chemical reactions involving high-pressure acid leaching and electro-winning, the cobalt is separated from the other minerals and impurities. The red earth and rock are stripped away, and what emerges is highly pure cobalt metal or cobalt salts like cobalt sulfate. This refined material is now, a valuable, high-purity chemical precursor, ready to be used in the manufacturing of battery components. The cobalt sulfate is sold to cathode manufacturers, who then mix it with lithium, nickel, manganese, and other elements according to their proprietary formulas. This mixture is then coated onto aluminum foil to create the cathode, which is the positive electrode and really the heart of the lithium-ion battery. This cathode is then combined with an anode, a separator, and an electrolyte, and packaged into a battery cell. These individual cells are, in effect, the building blocks of the power sources for all our modern devices. It's at this stage of the supply chain that the world's most recognizable technology and automotive companies enter the picture. Companies like Apple, Samsung, Tesla, and Volkswagen don't typically buy raw cobalt ore from the Congo. Instead, they purchase their batteries or battery components from a handful of large Asian manufacturers, such as CATL, LG Chem, or Panasonic. These battery giants are the ones who buy the refined cobalt from the Chinese refineries. This creates several layers of separation between the big tech brands and the mines in the Congo, allowing them to claim that they're not directly involved in the problematic mining practices on the ground. This layered and fragmented supply chain is what makes accountability so incredibly difficult. A company like Tesla or Apple can state that they have a policy against child labor and demand that their direct suppliers, the battery makers, comply. The battery makers, in turn, can demand the same from their suppliers, the cobalt refiners. However, tracing the cobalt all the way back through the Chinese refineries, across the ocean, through the depots in Kolwezi, and back to the specific pit where a child might have been working is a near impossible task, especially given the mixing that occurs at the depots. The complexity of the supply chain becomes a shield, protecting the most profitable companies at the top from the ugly realities at the bottom. To understand the human cost of cobalt, we must listen to the voices of the people who live this reality every day. We sat down with miners who shared stories of brutality, One miner, Jean-Pierre, showed us the scars from years of digging. Another, Banza, spoke of the fear of a collapse. He dreams of leaving the mines, but the pits are the only option. We also spoke with mothers and wives. Elodie wept as she recounted a tunnel collapse that left her husband unable to work. The mine gives, but it always takes away much more. These accounts paint a devastating picture of life at the bottom of the cobalt supply chain. They are stories of struggle, but also of resilience and hope. Their voices are a plea for the world to see the human faces behind the mineral. A heart-wrenching reality of Congolese cobalt mines is the pervasive presence of children. Thousands of children are engaged in hazardous labor, performing grueling tasks. Some as young as 6 descend into narrow tunnels, hauling heavy sacks. Girls sift ore in toxic water. This is a desperate necessity for families on the brink of starvation due to extreme poverty and lack of alternatives. Their school is the mine, their childhood stolen. The physical and psychological impact is catastrophic. Heavy lifting deforms bones, and toxic dust damages lungs. They are robbed of their right to play and learn. This crisis is happening in plain sight. Cobalt dug by children enters the global supply chain, powering our phones and cars. A single child in a mine is an unforgivable system failure. Beyond immediate dangers, a slower crisis unfolds in mining communities, a devastating health catastrophe. The very earth that provides income is poisoning the people. Dust laden with cobalt and toxic heavy metals fills the air. Chronic exposure leads to severe, often fatal conditions. Cobalt lung causes irreversible scarring. Mining contaminates water sources used for drinking and cooking, leading to skin diseases and organ damage. Studies show high levels of heavy metals in residents, with pregnant women at higher risk of birth defects. This disaster is a consequence of prioritizing profit over life. There are no environmental protections or health and safety standards. Miners are treated as disposable, with health consequences externalized to impoverished communities. For every artisanal miner in the Congo, death is a constant presence. The greatest fear is a tunnel collapse. The mines are dug by hand with no structural supports. Miners follow cobalt veins, creating a labyrinth of tunnels. The tunnels are unstable, especially during the rainy season, making collapses frequent. Rescue efforts are frantic, but survival chances are slim. Beyond collapses, there's lack of ventilation, toxic gases, and dangerous heights. Poverty leaves miners no choice but to gamble each day, knowing their lives are valued less than the cobalt they seek. This dehumanization treats their existence as expendable in the global quest for cobalt. While the image of the Congolese cobalt miner is typically male, the reality on the ground is that women play a crucial yet often overlooked role in this industry. They are the forgotten miners, performing some of the most arduous and least compensated labor in the entire supply chain. While fewer women work underground, they dominate the surface-level activities essential for preparing the ore for sale. Tens of thousands of women spend their days in the searing sun or pouring rain, engaged in the back-breaking work of washing, sorting, and grading the cobalt ore that men bring up from the pits. The work is physically punishing. Women stand for hours on end, hunched over piles of rock, often with babies strapped to their backs. They use their bare hands to sift through sharp-edged stones, picking out the valuable pieces. They then carry heavy basins of ore to nearby streams or pools of contaminated water to wash away the excess dirt, a process that exposes them to a toxic cocktail of heavy metals. For this full day of grueling labor, a woman might earn as little as $1 or $2, a fraction of what male miners earn. They are at the absolute bottom of the pay scale, their essential contributions systematically devalued. Women in the mining communities face a dual burden of labor and caregiving. After a long day of working at the mine site, they return home to domestic responsibilities, collecting water, preparing food, and caring for their children and families. They are also the primary caregivers for men who are injured or fall ill from mining work. This places an immense strain on them, trapping them in a relentless cycle of work and poverty with little chance of escape. The chaotic, male-dominated environment exposes women to high risk of sexual harassment, exploitation, and violence, adding another layer of danger to their daily existence. Despite these immense hardships, the women demonstrate extraordinary resilience. They form informal cooperatives to support one another, pooling their meager resources and sharing the burdens of childcare. They are the backbone of their families and communities, holding things together in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their stories are a critical part of the cobalt narrative, highlighting the gendered impacts of the mining industry. Recognizing their work and struggles is essential to understanding the full scope of the crisis and developing solutions that empower all members of these communities, not just the men who work underground. The devastating impact of cobalt mining bleeds out into the surrounding environment, poisoning the land, air, and water, creating a community-wide crisis. Rivers and streams have been turned into toxic sewers, destroying a traditional source of food and income. Communities are forced to consume contaminated water, knowing it is making them sick because they have no other alternative. The soil has become so contaminated that it is no longer suitable for agriculture. This creates a vicious cycle, deepening the crisis for the next generation. The local communities suffer all of the consequences of the pollution, while the profits flow to distant corporations and consumers. This is a fundamental human rights issue. The right to a clean and healthy environment is being systematically violated. In the shadow of the cobalt mines, the future of an entire generation is being stolen by the collapse of the education system. For children in the Congo, attending school remains a dream. Schools are scarce, underfunded, and inaccessible. Families must pay for fees and supplies impossible for those earning so little. The mining economy incentivizes children to work, offering immediate income. Education's long-term benefits seem distant compared to the need for food. This creates a generational trap with few opportunities outside mining. The few schools face challenges like overcrowding and shortages of resources. Teachers are poorly paid, making quality education nearly impossible. The system fails its students, perpetuating poverty. This crisis prioritizes resource extraction over human development, denying children education and ensuring future miners. The stolen future of these children is a high cost of our cobalt demand. The ultimate and most damning impact of the cobalt industry on Congolese communities is the creation of a deeply entrenched and self-perpetuating cycle of poverty. The presence of this incredibly valuable resource, which should be a source of national wealth and local prosperity, has instead become an engine for dispossession and despair. The global demand for cobalt has created a monoculture economy in regions like Katanga, where all other forms of livelihood such as agriculture and local trade have been pushed aside. The entire community becomes dependent on the mine, a single precarious source of income that is controlled by forces far beyond their reach. This dependency creates a classic poverty trap. Because there are no other jobs, people are forced to accept the dangerous conditions and exploitative wages offered in the artisanal mines. The meager income they earn is just enough for daily survival, but never enough to save, invest, or build a better future. They cannot afford to send their children to school, ensuring that the next generation will also lack the skills to find work outside the mines. They cannot afford proper healthcare, so they suffer from chronic illnesses that reduce their ability to work. The system is perfectly designed to keep people poor, dependent, and compliant, ensuring a steady supply of cheap labor for the bottom of the supply chain. The vast profits generated by cobalt flow almost entirely out of the community and out of the country. The artisanal miners receive a tiny fraction of the mineral's final value. The middlemen, the depot owners, the transport companies, the international traders, the refiners, and the multinational corporations at the top capture the overwhelming majority of the wealth. This massive extraction of value leaves the communities impoverished, with crumbling infrastructure, no social services, and no economic development. The global demand effectively subsidizes the profits of the world's richest companies with the poverty and suffering of the world's most vulnerable people. This cycle is not an accident of fate, it is the result of a deliberate global economic structure. It is a modern form of colonial exploitation, where a resource-rich land is plundered for the benefit of foreign powers, leaving the local population with nothing but the environmental and social wreckage. Breaking this cycle requires more than just charity or small-scale interventions. It requires a fundamental restructuring of the cobalt supply chain to ensure that a fair share of the wealth is returned to the communities that produce it. Until then, the people of the Congo will remain trapped, their poverty a direct consequence of the global demand for the blue gold beneath their feet. The cobalt rush violently reshapes the land. Vast tracts of forest and savanna are clear-cut to access the cobalt-rich soil. Trees are felled with brutal efficiency, their roots torn from the ground for sprawling open pits. Deforestation is the first devastating blow to the ecosystem. It destroys habitats, destabilizes soil, and removes vital green lungs. The landscape is stripped bare and vulnerable. Digging begins, causing profound land degradation. The artisanal mining method involves turning over massive volumes of earth, creating a chaotic topography of deep pits and towering waste heaps. This alters the land, destroying fertile topsoil. The ground becomes unstable and prone to erosion. During the rainy season, water washes away the exposed soil. The land is fundamentally broken. The devastation on the land inevitably flows into the water, transforming the lifeblood of the region, its rivers and streams, into toxic conduits of pollution. The process of washing the cobalt ore is a primary source of this contamination. Women and children spend their days at the water's edge, plunging sacks of crushed rock into the current to separate the dirt from the valuable mineral. This activity directly releases enormous quantities of sediment, and more dangerously, heavy metals into the water. The rivers become murky with suspended solids, but the invisible threat is the dissolved cobalt, lead, cadmium, and even uranium that now flow downstream, poisoning the aquatic ecosystem and every community that relies on the river for its survival. The runoff from the mines and their massive waste heaps creates another relentless source of pollution. Every time it rains, water percolates through the piles of excavated rock, leaching out a toxic brew of metallic compounds and acidic drainage. This contaminated water flows freely across the landscape, eventually finding its way into the groundwater and the local river systems. There are no tailings dams, no containment ponds, no environmental regulations to prevent this. The result is a chronic, large-scale poisoning event. Rivers that once ran clear and teemed with fish now often flow with an unnatural, sickly blue or orange hue, a visual indicator of the chemical soup they have become. The consequences for human and animal life are catastrophic. The contaminated water is used for everything: drinking, cooking, bathing, and washing clothes. This direct exposure leads to a litany of health problems, from severe skin rashes and gastrointestinal illnesses to long-term neurological damage and an increased risk of cancer and birth defects. The fish populations, a vital source of protein for local diets, have been decimated, unable to survive in the toxic water. This not only creates a public health crisis, but also deepens the food insecurity in the region, forcing an even greater reliance on the mining economy that is the source of the problem. The contamination does not respect local boundaries. It is a creeping poison that travels with the current. The pollution that enters a small stream near a mine in Kolwezi can eventually find its way into larger tributaries and, ultimately, into the mighty Congo River system, one of the most important river basins on the planet. The environmental damage caused by this unregulated mining has far-reaching implications, potentially affecting ecosystems and communities hundreds of miles downstream. The rivers, which should be symbols of life and connection, have been weaponized by the cobalt industry, turned into vectors of disease and ecological death that spread the mine's toxic legacy far and wide. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is one of the most biodiverse countries on Earth, home to a breathtaking array of wildlife including iconic and endangered species like forest elephants, okapis, and the great apes. The Congo Basin rainforest is a global treasure, a critical sanctuary for life. However, the relentless expansion of cobalt mining is placing this incredible natural heritage under extreme threat, causing a silent suffocation of the region's wildlife. The most immediate impact is habitat destruction. The clear-cutting of forests and the degradation of savanna grasslands for mining eliminate the homes, feeding grounds, and migration routes for countless animals, pushing them into smaller and more fragmented areas. The contamination of the environment creates a deadly, invisible threat to the animals that remain. The poisoning of rivers and streams devastates aquatic life from the smallest insects to the largest fish, and has a cascading effect up the food chain. Birds, reptiles, and mammals that drink from these polluted water sources or consume contaminated prey suffer from heavy metal poisoning, just as humans do. This can lead to reproductive failure, developmental abnormalities, and death. The very building blocks of the ecosystem are being corrupted, leading to a slow, agonizing decline in animal populations that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. The influx of large populations into the mining areas also increases the pressure on wildlife through the bushmeat trade. With traditional agriculture failing due to land degradation and fish stocks collapsing from water pollution, hunting for wild animals becomes a primary source of protein for the mining communities. This surge in hunting, often unregulated and indiscriminate, puts immense pressure on local wildlife populations, including protected and endangered species. The new roads and access routes created for the mines also open up previously remote forest areas to poachers, further accelerating the decline of the region's fauna. The mines therefore act as a catalyst for a multi-pronged assault on the animal life of the Congo. This loss of biodiversity is a tragedy with global implications. The ecosystems of the Congo Basin play a crucial role in regulating regional and global climate patterns. The loss of keystone species and the unraveling of complex ecological webs can have unforeseen consequences, destabilizing the entire system. We are sacrificing a priceless, irreplaceable natural heritage for a temporary economic gain. The silent suffocation of the Congo's wildlife is a stark reminder that the environmental cost of cobalt is not just measured in tons of polluted soil or water, but also in the permanent loss of the magnificent creatures with whom we share this planet. The assault on the environment is not limited to the land and water. It extends to the very air that people breathe. The mining areas of the Congo are shrouded in a perpetual haze of dust and pollution. The constant digging, crushing, and transportation of rock and soil releases enormous quantities of fine particulate matter into the atmosphere. This dust, which is not merely inert dirt but is laden with toxic heavy metals, hangs heavy in the air, coating every surface and filling the lungs of every man, woman, and child living in the vicinity. There are no measures taken to suppress the dust, no water sprayed on the roads or work areas, leaving the community to choke on the byproducts of the industry. This dust is more than just a nuisance, it is a profound public health menace. The fine particles, known as PM 2.5, are small enough to penetrate deep into the respiratory system and even enter the bloodstream. Chronic inhalation of this cobalt-laden dust leads directly to the debilitating and often fatal cobalt lung disease. But it also contributes to a host of other health issues. It exacerbates asthma, increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes, and has been linked to developmental problems in children. The air itself has become a vector for disease, a constant, unavoidable threat to the well-being of the entire community. The air pollution is compounded by the smoke that billows from the thousands of charcoal fires used for cooking in the densely packed shanty towns. This creates a thick, acrid smog that further degrades the local air quality. In addition, the informal and unregulated smelting of ore, sometimes done on a small scale to try and concentrate the metal before selling, releases even more dangerous fumes and chemical compounds directly into the atmosphere without any filtration. The air in these communities is a toxic soup of mineral dust, smoke, and chemical pollutants, a far cry from the clean air that should be a basic human right. This toxic fallout doesn't stay localized. The dust and pollutants can be carried by the wind for many miles, settling on agricultural fields and villages far from the mines themselves, contaminating crops and soil over a wide area. This atmospheric deposition is another insidious way that the poison of the mines spreads across the landscape. The environmental consequences of cobalt mining are not neatly contained within the boundaries of the pits. They are pervasive, affecting every essential element of life, the land, the water, and the air, creating a comprehensive environmental crisis that suffocates the region and threatens the long-term health of its people and its ecosystems. When the cobalt in a particular area is exhausted and the miners move on, they do not leave a recovering landscape behind them. They leave a permanent environmental scar, a barren and toxic wasteland that may be uninhabitable for centuries. The physical destruction of the land, with its deep pits and unstable waste heaps, makes it structurally unsafe and unsuitable for any future use, be it housing or agriculture. The cost of remediating such a landscape, of filling the pits, stabilizing the soil, and restoring the natural contours, is astronomical. And there is no entity, corporate or governmental, that takes responsibility for this cleanup. The land is simply abandoned in its broken state. Even more troubling than the physical destruction is the chemical legacy left behind in the soil. Decades of mining activity have saturated the earth with a cocktail of heavy metals. Cobalt, lead, cadmium, and arsenic are now present in the soil at concentrations that are thousands of times higher than natural background levels. These metals do not simply degrade or wash away over time, they are persistent, remaining in the soil for generations. This contamination makes the land permanently unsafe for farming, as any crops grown there would absorb the toxic metals, posing a severe health risk to anyone who consumed them. The land's ability to produce food is lost forever. This creation of sacrifice zones, areas so thoroughly polluted that they are effectively written off as uninhabitable, is one of the most tragic long-term consequences of the cobalt rush. It represents the theft of a future birthright from the people of the Congo. Land that could have supported future generations through farming, forestry, or conservation is rendered a permanent liability, a source of ongoing pollution and danger. These barren landscapes stand as silent, enduring monuments to the true cost of our technological progress, a stark reminder of the environmental debt we are accumulating. The legacy is not just poverty, but a poisoned and unusable earth. Ultimately, this raises profound questions of environmental justice. The communities that suffer the long-term consequences of this devastation are the ones who benefited the least from the resource extraction. They are left to live amidst the wreckage with their health compromised, their livelihoods destroyed, and their land rendered worthless. The global consumers and corporations that reap the profits from the cobalt are physically and psychologically distant from this wasteland, shielded from the consequences of their consumption. This barren legacy is the final damning evidence of a global system that externalizes its environmental costs onto the most vulnerable, creating a future of uninhabitability for some in the pursuit of convenience for others. We arrive now at the deepest and most unsettling paradox of the cobalt story. The mineral is being extracted in ever-increasing quantities to power a global green revolution, to build the electric cars and battery storage systems that are meant to save our planet from the ravages of climate change. We tell ourselves a story of clean energy and a sustainable future, yet the very foundation of that future is being built with materials sourced through one of the most environmentally destructive and socially exploitative processes on Earth. This is the great climate paradox. Our quest for a cleaner planet is creating a toxic wasteland in the heart of Africa. The environmental footprint of producing a single electric vehicle is immense, and it begins in the mines of the Congo. The deforestation required to access the cobalt releases vast amounts of stored carbon into the atmosphere. The energy-intensive processes of mining, transporting, and refining the ore are heavily reliant on fossil fuels, further contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. The destruction of ecosystems and biodiversity undermines the planet's natural resilience to climate change. In our haste to solve one environmental problem, carbon emissions from tailpipes, we are actively creating a host of others, including land degradation, water pollution, and habitat loss. This paradox forces us to ask difficult questions about what we truly mean by sustainability. Is a technology truly sustainable if it merely shifts the environmental burden from the consumer's backyard to a remote, impoverished community? Can we call an energy source clean if its production relies on poisoning rivers and sickening children? The current model of the Green Revolution is built on a dangerous form of environmental hypocrisy, one that prioritizes the visible pollution of the developed world while ignoring the hidden, devastating impacts in the developing world. It is a selective sustainability that cleans the air in one place by poisoning the earth in another. Confronting this paradox is essential if we are to build a genuinely just and sustainable future. It is not enough to simply switch from gasoline to batteries. We must fundamentally rethink the entire life cycle of our technologies, from the extraction of raw materials to their end-of-life disposal. This means demanding radical transparency in supply chains, investing in technologies that reduce or eliminate the need for conflict minerals like cobalt, and insisting that the environmental and human costs of production are included in the price of our products. Without this holistic approach, the Green Revolution risks becoming a hollow victory, a technological fix that saves the climate but sacrifices the planet and its people in the process. At the peak of the global cobalt supply chain sit powerful companies like Apple, Samsung, Google, Tesla, Ford, and Volkswagen. They are the ultimate customers of Congolese cobalt. Their demand for lithium-ion batteries drives the entire system. For years, these giants enjoyed distance from the mines, but journalists and human rights organizations started to shine a light on the issue, connecting the cobalt from child miners to batteries inside popular gadgets and electric cars. Forced into the spotlight, they had no choice but to acknowledge the problem and pledge commitment to responsible sourcing. Would these acknowledgements translate into meaningful action? In response to the growing pressure, the world's leading tech and auto companies launched a flurry of initiatives and policy statements. They updated their supplier codes of conduct, explicitly prohibiting the use of child labor, forced labor, and unsafe working conditions. They published annual conflict minerals or responsible sourcing reports, detailing their efforts to map their supply chains and identify potential risks. These documents are often glossy, professionally designed, and filled with the language of corporate social responsibility. They speak of due diligence, transparency, stakeholder engagement, and a commitment to continuous improvement. On paper, it looks like a concerted and serious effort to clean up the industry. A key part of these corporate strategies has been joining industry-wide collaborations. Initiatives like the Responsible Minerals Initiative, or RMI, were created to develop common tools and standards for companies to use. The RMI's main tool is the Responsible Minerals Assurance Process, or RMAP, a program that audits smelters and refiners, the choke points in the supply chain, to determine if their materials are conflict-free. The idea is that if tech companies only buy from audited, conformant refiners, they can be sure their cobalt is clean. Many corporations now point to their high percentage of sourcing from RMAP conformant refiners as proof of their ethical commitment. Furthermore, some of the wealthiest companies have gone a step further, launching their own direct programs in the DRC. They have funded pilot projects aimed at formalizing artisanal mining sites, improving safety standards, and implementing monitoring systems to prevent child labor. They have partnered with NGOs on the ground to support community programs, such as building schools or providing alternative livelihoods for women. These projects are often highlighted in their reports and marketing materials, presented as evidence of their proactive, hands-on approach to solving the problem at its source. They paint a picture of benevolent corporations investing back into the communities they depend on. The problem is that these pledges on paper and pilot projects, while sounding impressive, often fail to address the systemic nature of the crisis. The policies apply to their direct Tier 1 suppliers, the battery makers, but enforcing those standards down through the multiple opaque layers to the mines themselves is another matter entirely. The industry-wide initiatives provide a convenient shield, allowing individual companies to claim they are following best practices, even when those practices are demonstrably failing. The world of corporate policy can create an illusion of progress, a carefully crafted narrative that masks a continuing reality of exploitation on the ground. Corporate responsibility for cobalt rests on the audit. Companies hire third-party firms to inspect suppliers and verify ethical standards. These audits are presented as a rigorous check on the system. However, this auditing system is deeply flawed and conceals more than it reveals. They are often pre-announced, giving facilities time to prepare. It is difficult to uncover attempts to hide the true origin of materials. The mixing of ore presents an insurmountable obstacle for the auditing process. The audit validates the policy, not the reality, creating a dangerous gap. Auditing firms are paid by the very companies they are auditing, creating a conflict of interest. The entire system is incentivized to produce positive results, not to uncover uncomfortable truths. It provides the illusion of oversight without the substance. Faced with problems cleaning up the Congolese cobalt supply chain, many companies are touting a different solution, getting rid of cobalt altogether. The push for cobalt-free batteries has become a major talking point in the tech and automotive industries. It promises a way to sidestep the ethical nightmare in the DRC entirely, allowing them to sever their connection to the problem rather than solve it. Major electric vehicle manufacturers, particularly in China, have embraced LFP for their standard range models. However, the push for cobalt-free is not a silver bullet, and it comes with its own set of serious unintended consequences for the millions of people in the Congo. More importantly, simply shifting to another material does not guarantee ethical sourcing. Who pays for ethical sourcing? Today, Congolese communities bear the cost with their health and future while corporations profit. True responsibility means companies must internalize these costs, ensuring fair wages, safe conditions, and environmental repair, so our progress isn't built on their suffering. Despite hardship, Congolese mining communities show remarkable resilience, supporting each other, sharing resources, and nurturing hope. Their strength and solidarity are the foundation for real change. Local activists, miners, teachers, leaders are organizing for justice, forming cooperatives, and fighting for rights and safety. Their courage is shifting power and demanding a fair share of Congo's wealth. NGOs and international groups support Congolese activists with resources, advocacy, and global attention. Together, they amplify local voices and pressure corporations to act responsibly. Building a future beyond mining means investing in farming, skills training, and entrepreneurship. These efforts offer safer livelihoods and restore hope for a sustainable, self-determined economy. Journalists and researchers expose the realities of cobalt mining fueling global outrage and reform. Their work, often at great risk, ensures the world cannot ignore Congo's story. The combined efforts of local activists, NGOs, journalists, and researchers are culminating in a powerful global awakening. A broad-based movement for justice in the cobalt supply chain is gaining momentum around the world. It's a movement made up of concerned consumers, student groups, ethical investors, and policymakers, all demanding an end to exploitation. This growing chorus of voices is creating a new political and economic reality, one where corporate indifference just isn't acceptable anymore. The tide is, slowly but surely beginning to turn, driven by a shared sense of moral responsibility. This global movement is leveraging consumer power in new and creative ways. Apps and websites are being developed that allow consumers to scan a product's barcode and learn about the company's sourcing policies. University student groups are running successful campaigns demanding that their institutions adopt ethical procurement policies for their electronics. This grassroots pressure from the market is sending a clear signal to companies. Ethical sourcing is no longer a niche concern, but a core business issue. Consumers are starting to vote with their wallets, choosing to support brands that can actually demonstrate a real commitment to cleaning up their supply chains. The movement is also making headway in the halls of power. Spurred by public pressure and damning reports, governments in Europe and the United States are beginning to take action. They are proposing and passing new laws that require companies to conduct mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence on their entire supply chains. These laws move beyond the voluntary, self-regulatory approach that has failed and introduce the threat of real legal and financial penalties for companies that fail to prevent abuses. This shift towards binding regulation is, honestly, a game changer, forcing companies to take the issue seriously or face the consequences. This is the dawn of a new era of accountability. The journey is long and the challenges remain immense. The entrenched systems of exploitation will not be dismantled overnight, but there is undeniable hope in this global awakening. There is hope in the resilience of the Congolese people, in the courage of their activists, and in the growing solidarity of a world that is finally waking up to its connection to the red earth of the Congo. The narrative of Cobalt is slowly being rewritten, from one of darkness and despair to one of struggle, hope, and the relentless pursuit of a just and sustainable future for all. The journey into the heart of the Congo's cobalt mines forces us to a confrontation with ourselves. In its reflection we see the faces of the miners, the polluted rivers and the stolen childhoods, but also our own. We see our hands holding the smartphones and our feet on the pedals of the electric cars that promise a greener tomorrow. This story is about us, making us participants whether we choose to be or not. Acknowledging this connection is the first step toward any meaningful resolution. Our position at the top of the consumer chain gives us immense power to be part of the solution. Our collective voice, purchasing decisions, and insistence on a higher ethical standard have the power to reshape that system. Ultimately, confronting the mirror means accepting that our modern comforts are entangled with a profound human and environmental crisis. Acknowledging our responsibility is essential. Hope requires a clear and actionable path forward, a blueprint for transforming the cobalt industry into one of shared prosperity and environmental stewardship. This blueprint must be multifaceted, involving action at every level of the supply chain, from the individual consumer to the largest multinational corporations and governments. The first plank of this platform is radical transparency. We must demand supply chains that are fully traceable. Governments must enact and enforce strong mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence laws, holding corporations legally and financially accountable. The blueprint must also focus on direct investment in the Congolese communities themselves. A percentage of the profits from all cobalt sales must be funneled back into a dedicated community development fund. Finally, as consumers and citizens, our role is to be the engine of this change. It provides a clear, tangible set of goals to work towards. Imagine a different future for cobalt, a future of dawn, not darkness. The Democratic Republic of the Congo can leverage its wealth for its people. Artisanal mining cooperatives owned and operated by the Congolese with fair wages and dignity. Profits invested back into the community, building a robust local economy. Trace the cobalt in your smartphone back to the cooperative that mined it. Companies competing on the ethics and sustainability of their supply chains. This tangible future requires political will, corporate accountability, and consumer consciousness, fueled by the courage of activists and a growing global awakening to justice. Cobalt's story offers an opportunity for profound transformation. By acting together, we can help a more hopeful and just future take